My name's Caleb, I'm 32, and up until last year, I thought my family was complicated, but manageable. I never imagined I'd be sitting at our annual Christmas Eve dinner, sipping from a glass of red wine while my brother declared himself the new head of the family, like we were characters in some low-budget mafia movie. It's hard to explain the dynamic in our house without sounding like I'm exaggerating. But here's the thing. If you've ever had a sibling who was the golden child and a parent who enabled that fantasy long past childhood, you'll understand exactly what I mean. We were sitting in my mother's dining room, the same house I grew up in, still filled with knickknacks from when my parents actually liked each other. My father had passed away in May. Sudden stroke. No warning. One moment he was telling me about a weird clicking noise in the garage. The next I was standing in a hospital hallway watching the color drain from my mother's face. Grief didn't hit her the way it hit me. Or maybe it did, and she just buried it behind that ice-cold composure she'd perfected over the years. Either way, she barely looked at me for the rest of the summer. The months following his death had been a blur of paperwork, memorial planning, estate meetings, and long silences. The kind where your phone rings and you stare at it for a second, hoping it's someone who'll talk about anything but family. That rarely happened. Instead, I got a barrage of texts from my older brother Adam, who, despite being 3 years my senior, still acted like a frat boy who'd been handed the keys to a kingdom he didn't earn. He lived 2 towns over in a house my dad had helped him buy, with his wife Marla and their twin boys. My sister Chloe lived closer, just 10 minutes down the road in a condo she couldn't afford without Mom's occasional help. I lived in the city, about an hour away, and worked in mergers and acquisitions. Not the most glamorous job, but it paid well, and I kept to myself. Dad and I had always had a quiet understanding. He respected my boundaries, and I never pushed too hard when it came to the family drama he constantly tried to buffer me from. After Dad passed, I noticed something start to shift. Subtle at first. A group text would go out, but I'd get it hours late. A dinner would be planned and accidentally not include me. My mother started referring to Adam as your father's rock, even though I was the one who had driven her to every single legal appointment that summer. Chloe began acting like Adam had single-handedly held the family together during the funeral, even though he'd shown up late and forgotten to bring the slideshow I'd made. But I kept my mouth shut, not because I was weak, but because I was patient. That's something Dad taught me early on. When people show you what they think of you, don't argue, he once said. Just take note and plan accordingly. What they didn't know, what they still didn't know that Christmas Eve, was that my father and I had had a conversation. Several, actually. Starting 2 years before his death, when he'd begun quietly moving his assets and reshaping the family trust. I never asked him to. In fact, I was uncomfortable when he first brought it up. I told him I didn't want to be involved in family politics. His reply was simple. You're the only one I trust not to waste it. I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. The day he signed the last set of papers, January 1st of that year, he sent me a message. It's done. Whatever happens, you'll know what to do. I didn't really understand what that meant until tonight. We were halfway through dinner. My mom had made her usual overcooked ham. Adam brought a smug bottle of Merlot he couldn't pronounce, and Chloe arrived wearing one of those scarves that look expensive, but you know she got it at a discount boutique and removed the tags. It was the first Christmas without Dad, but no one mentioned him. At least not until Adam stood up, cleared his throat, and said the words that would start the unraveling of everything. So, I figured now's a good time to just put it out there, he began, raising his glass. Since Dad's gone, I think it makes sense that I take over the estate. You know, manage things. Keep it all running smoothly. Chloe giggled like she was at a wedding toast. To the new head of the family, she said, lifting her glass and clinking it against Adam's. I stayed silent. Mom didn't even flinch. She just nodded, reached for a piece of bread, and added, It's only right. You've always been the responsible one. That one cut deep. Not because it was true. It wasn't. But because it wasn't even close to true, and she knew it. Adam had dropped out of 2 colleges, crashed 3 cars my parents paid for, and had borrowed more money than I could count. But somehow, he'd always been their pride and joy. I could feel my face heating up, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just reached down, slid my laptop bag out from under the chair, and unzipped it slowly. I could sense their eyes shift toward me. A flicker of confusion from Chloe. A smirk from Adam. Caleb, my mom said, her tone warning. Let's not turn this into something dramatic. I opened the laptop, clicked a folder, opened a PDF. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady when I spoke. That's weird, I said, spinning the screen around. Because according to this, I own everything starting January 1st. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. For a second, no one spoke. Not a single fork clinked against a plate. My brother's face drained of color faster than wine spilling across a tablecloth. Chloe froze mid-sip. My mother's hand hovered in the air, that piece of bread still untouched. What is this? Adam asked, voice suddenly sharp. Dad's final amendments, I said simply. The ones he filed with the family attorney last year. Everything. The house, the trust, the vacation property, the residuals, transfers to me. Fully. Irrevocably. My mom blinked. That's not possible. It is, I said. I have the paperwork. The recorded conversation. The notarized documents. Would you like to see the timestamp? You're lying, Adam snapped. Dad would never do that to us. He told me. He promised. I'd take over everything. I didn't respond. I just kept the laptop turned toward them. And that's when Chloe stood up, her voice trembling. This is some kind of joke, right? You're just trying to mess with us. This isn't real. I looked her in the eye for the first time that night. He trusted me. Because I never asked for anything. Because I never lied to him. Because when he was sick last year, I was the only one who showed up. My mom opened her mouth to protest, but I wasn't done. I was the one who drove him to appointments. Who sat in that freezing waiting room for hours. Who got the call at 2 a.m. and stayed with him all night in the ER. You were all too busy. Adam looked like he wanted to throw something. Instead, he slammed his hand against the table. This is bull. Language, my mom cut in automatically. Old habits die hard. There was a storm brewing in the room. Years of resentment, buried under fake holiday cheer and wine-soaked toasts, rising like floodwater. And I had just cracked the dam open. But I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. That's when I reached for the second folder in my bag. The one labeled Transition Plan. I placed it on the table, slid it slowly toward my mother, and said, starting January 1st, we're doing things a little differently. She didn't reach for the folder. No one moved. It just sat there between us, thick with consequences. My mother stared at it like it might bite her. Her perfectly set expression had started to crack. You know the kind. The cold, controlled mask of a woman who built her entire world around appearances. Around having the perfect family. Even if that meant ignoring every crack in the foundation. Now the cracks were all she could see. Caleb, she said finally, her voice low and clipped. We're grieving. This isn't the time to be. This is exactly the time. I interrupted, calmly but firmly. You didn't let me speak at the funeral. You didn't even tell me when you started packing up his study. You've all been acting like I was a footnote in his life, when in reality, I was the one he trusted to carry on his legacy. Adam's chair screeched as he shoved it back and stood. His hands were clenched at his sides, face flushed with fury and confusion. You always thought you were better than us, he spat. Just because you moved to the city and got some fancy job. You were never here. You never did anything for this family. I blinked slowly. I wasn't here. Adam, I was the one who paid off Dad's medical debt when the insurance refused to cover half the treatments. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't need credit. I just wanted him to be okay. Chloe shifted uncomfortably in her seat, suddenly very interested in the condensation on her wine glass. She hadn't said much, not since realizing this wasn't a prank. I turned to her next. And you, Chloe, you took a trip to the Maldives while Dad was in the ICU. You posted beach pictures the same day we almost lost him. And when I texted you to come say goodbye, you left me on read for 6 hours and replied with a heart emoji. Her mouth opened, but she didn't speak. Just shook her head as if trying to rewind the moment, pretend it hadn't happened. I took a deep breath and stood up slowly, adjusting the sleeve of my blazer. My voice was calm, almost too calm, like I'd rehearsed this 1,000 times, and maybe I had, in my head, every night since June. I didn't want it to be this way, I said. But Dad knew how things would play out. He warned me. He told me exactly what you'd do. That you'd try to erase him the moment he wasn't here to stop you. That Adam would waltz in and claim the house like a prince inheriting a throne. I gestured to the folder again. This is the legal plan. Effective January 1st, I'm taking over all decisions regarding the estate, financial and otherwise. The accounts will consolidate under a single signature, Mine. The house, the lake property, the trust funds, everything. That includes the distribution schedule. Adam's brows furrowed. What does that mean? It means, I said, watching the words land like slow-motion wreckage, that the monthly allowances you've all grown comfortable with, they're being reviewed. Dad didn't want his hard-earned money funneled into bottomless pits. He wanted it to build something, to matter. Chloe sat up straighter, eyes wide. Wait, you're cutting us off. No, I replied. I'm setting expectations. Starting now, if you want support from the estate, you'll need to show how it's being used. School, business ventures, medical expenses, all valid. But if you're expecting money for spa weekends or your husband's third failed crypto startup, I wouldn't count on it. That broke the dam. You're punishing us? My mom snapped, finally coming to life. How dare you? This family has always been about supporting one another. That was your father's value. I turned to her, and for the first time in years, really looked at her, not as my mother, but as a woman who had chosen sides long ago and pretended not to notice the wreckage. Then maybe he got tired of supporting people who never supported him back, I said, softly. Her face went pale. Dad told me about the year Adam almost lost the house. How he covered it up so you wouldn't be embarrassed at the garden club. He told me about the loans Chloe never repaid. And he told me about the account he opened in my name the day I graduated college. The one he kept adding to, even when he stopped paying for Adam's legal messes. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth. What account? I met her eyes. Exactly. My mom sank back in her chair like the air had been knocked out of her. Adam was still standing, stunned into silence. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the old radiator in the corner, the same one Dad used to joke about replacing every year but never did. I gathered my things slowly, slipping the laptop back into its bag and tucking the folder under my arm. I'm not trying to destroy this family, I said, quieter now. But I am done pretending everything's fine. I'm done playing along with your stories about who was responsible and who wasn't. Dad saw what was really happening. He saw through all of it, and he made a choice. I walked toward the door, pausing beside the family portrait still hanging crookedly in the hallway. We'd taken it 10 years ago. Everyone was smiling. But even then, I remember the way my father's hand rested on my shoulder, a subtle but unmistakable sign of where his trust truly lay. I'll be in touch before the new year, I said, turning back one last time. You should read the folder. There are some things you'll want to prepare for. And with that, I stepped into the cold night air, the sound of the door clicking shut behind me. Inside, the silence exploded. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove. No destination, no music, just the dull hum of the engine and the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on my chest. The roads were nearly empty, just patches of frost on the asphalt and distant glows of Christmas lights blinking like nothing had changed. Like somewhere, families were still laughing over dessert, exchanging gifts, watching holiday movies in fleece pajamas. But in that old house, the one I used to call home, something had broken. And part of me wondered if it was always meant to. I stopped at an all-night diner on the edge of town, the kind with cracked leather booths and a jukebox that hasn't worked since 2004. The waitress didn't recognize me, which was perfect. I ordered a black coffee and just sat there, staring at my reflection in the window, the faint smear of condensation trailing down the glass. My phone buzzed once, then again, then 4 more times in the next 10 minutes. I didn't even have to look to know who it was. I let it sit on the table face down, the vibration a soft, persistent reminder that the fire I'd just lit was spreading. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I thought, finally, they'll see me for who I've always been. Not the afterthought, not the one they call when something breaks. The son Dad trusted most. But all I felt was a hollow ache in the pit of my stomach. Not guilt. No, I'd done nothing wrong, but something closer to mourning. Not for Dad. I'd already mourned him. This was different. This was mourning the idea of a family that had only ever existed in my head. Back at the house, I sat in the car for almost 20 minutes before going inside. I kept thinking about Adam's face when I said the words, "I own everything." The disbelief, the rage, the wounded pride. He hadn't expected it, because he'd never had to expect consequences. For his entire life, the world bent for him. And when it didn't, he threw tantrums until someone, usually Dad, cleaned up the mess. This time, no one was coming to save him. It wasn't until the next morning that the full storm hit. I woke to 37 unread messages. First was Adam. You're a snake. A selfish, conniving, ungrateful snake. Dad would be ashamed. Then Chloe. This isn't you, Caleb. I don't know what happened, but we're family. You can't just take everything away from us. And finally, from my mother. You have made your point. Now please, stop this before you destroy what little we have left. No one asked why Dad made the decisions he did. No one asked if I was okay. No one even tried to apologize. Just demands, accusations, emotional blackmail, and veiled threats wrapped in faux concern. At 10:32 a.m., I got a call from Mr. Brightman, Dad's lawyer. Morning, Caleb. Hope you managed to sleep a little. Barely, I muttered, pinching the bridge of my nose. He sighed. The kind of weary, knowing sigh only someone who's dealt with decades of entitled family clients can produce. I figured. I've had 3 voicemails already from your brother. 1 from your sister. And, of course, your mother has requested an emergency review of the estate documents. I almost laughed. Let me guess. She thinks Dad was coerced. That, or that he was confused. Which, given the extensive documentation, witness statements, and notarized footage of the signing, won't go far. We talked logistics. The transition was legally airtight. Starting January 1st, I'd be the primary executor and trustee. The house, mine. The lake property, also mine. Liquid assets, stock portfolios, rental incomes, all under my discretion. My father had spent the last 2 years preparing it all, shielding the estate from misuse while quietly building a firewall between his wishes and the people who would try to twist them. After we hung up, I sat there in my kitchen, the sun streaming weakly through the frost-touched windows, thinking about what came next. I knew I had the legal upper hand. But this wasn't just about contracts. This was about power, about control, about rewriting the story of who this family thought I was. At 2:17 p.m., my doorbell rang. I didn't answer at first, just watched from the upstairs window. It was Chloe, arms folded, pacing. Her car was still running. Probably didn't even plan to stay long. Just drop in, deliver a guilt trip, make herself the victim again. Classic Chloe. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She smiled, or tried to. It was brittle, tight at the corners. Hey, can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked in like she owned the place, scanning the hallway like she was cataloging the furniture. Like she expected to find something that would prove I didn't deserve this. So, she said, perching on the edge of the couch. Adam's a mess. I didn't respond. She looked up. He thinks you're going to kick Mom out of the house. I raised an eyebrow. Did I say that? No, but it's what he would do, if the roles were reversed. Silence. Then she shrugged. Maybe, but it's Mom's house. I mean, she's still grieving. She grieved more for the damn cat than for Dad. I snapped before I could stop myself. Chloe blinked, caught off guard. I sighed softer now. He was in pain, Chloe, and she just drifted. Wouldn't sit with him. Wouldn't help him eat. I was the one who stayed up with him at 3 a.m. when the meds made him hallucinate. I was the one who changed his sheets when I stopped myself. She couldn't even look at him. Chloe looked down at her hands. Her voice was small. I didn't know. No, you didn't ask. Another long silence. I just don't want things to fall apart, she whispered. We're all we have. I walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of water, and handed her one. No, I said quietly. We're all we choose to have. She took the glass, but didn't drink. So what happens now? And that's when I gave her the first real look at the new order. I'm not evicting anyone, I said. But there will be boundaries. And expectations. The money is going where Dad intended it to, not into vanity projects and spa days. You and Adam are going to need to learn how to stand on your own. She swallowed hard. He's not going to take this well. Good, I said. Because for the first time in his life, he has to. Then I reached for a second envelope on the side table, one I prepared the night before, sealed and initialed. I handed it to her. What's this? An option, I said. For you. Read it later. Just know it's your choice how this plays out. She stared at it, confused. And if I don't like it? I met her gaze, steady and unblinking. Then you'll find out what it feels like to be on the other side of the glass. She left without saying much after that. She slipped the envelope into her purse like it was something fragile and radioactive at the same time. I watched her drive off from my front porch, the wind biting through my sweater, her car shrinking into the gray winter afternoon. I didn't expect her to understand, not right away. But I hoped. Maybe, just maybe, she'd read the letter carefully, that it would settle in her gut like truth usually does, slowly, then all at once. The letter wasn't a threat. It was a lifeline. I had included an outline for a new trust, one she could be part of, not as a beneficiary with a blank check, but as a co-investor. I had taken a portion of the inheritance Dad left and earmarked it for a joint venture. A community center in the city where we grew up, something he'd always talked about building but never got the chance to. I didn't want the money just sitting in bonds and real estate portfolios. I wanted it to mean something. But that would only happen if they were willing to change, to contribute, to grow. And I was done waiting for them to make the first move. By the end of that week, the temperature dropped, and the first snow of the season finally came. I was in the middle of reorganizing my files when I got the email. Subject: formal notice, estate objection filed. Adam had done it. He'd gone full scorched earth. I wasn't surprised. His ego had always been louder than his common sense. But I didn't expect him to go behind my back and try to convince the court that Dad had been mentally compromised when signing the final documents. He'd even dug up an old voicemail Dad left him during a medication haze, hoping to pass it off as proof. Mr. Brightman called me immediately. He doesn't have a case, Caleb. The documentation is airtight. Multiple doctors signed off on your father's mental capacity when the amendments were made. We have recordings, witnesses, a digital trail a mile long. This is desperation. But desperation has a funny way of turning into damage. Even if I won, and I would, the process would drag us all through months of court dates, legal fees, and ugly headlines. And I knew Adam didn't care. He just wanted to burn something down if he couldn't sit on the throne. What he didn't know was that I had already prepared for this too. A week later, I filed a countermotion, not just to affirm the trust's legitimacy, but to freeze all current disbursements to Adam and Chloe during litigation. Chloe called me in tears the next morning. He's out of his mind, she whispered. He said if I don't support him in court, he'll go after me next. Do you want to be tied to his fallout? I asked. Or do you want to build something better? I don't know anymore, she said. I just want it to stop. That same night, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked thinner than usual, her coat too big for her shoulders, her lipstick carefully applied but cracked at the corners. She held a casserole dish in one hand, like she thought we could pretend everything was normal. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside without saying a word. She placed the casserole on the counter, then looked around, taking in the neat shelves, the framed photo of Dad and me fishing when I was 8, the simple calm of the space. She looked like she was searching for something to criticize, and came up empty. You always did keep a clean place, she said softly. I stayed quiet. She finally turned to face me. Adam's angry, scared. He's not built for this kind of thing. I gave her a hard look. And I am. She flinched. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. You always have. She looked away. I was there when he passed away, I said. You were too busy sorting through insurance paperwork to sit with him. You sent me in to tell him the latest test results because you couldn't handle it. And now you want to tell me who's strong enough to lead this family. A silence stretched between us, tight and raw. I failed him, she said suddenly. I know that. I didn't say anything. She took a deep breath. You're angry. Rightfully so. But Caleb, you need to understand something. I was afraid. Afraid of watching the only man I ever trusted waste away in front of me. I thought if I kept things running, if I stayed busy, I wouldn't fall apart. I believed her. Or at least, I believed that she believed herself. I'm not trying to destroy anyone, I said. But I won't enable the same cycle anymore. Not for Adam. Not for Chloe. Not for you. She nodded slowly. Then, without a word, she reached into her purse and handed me something. A faded envelope, sealed and yellowed with age. What is it? A letter, she said. Your father wrote it. I never read it. He said it was for you. I sat down on the couch, the envelope heavy in my hands. I waited until she left before I opened it. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Dad's messy scrawl. Caleb, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I wish I could have had this conversation with you face to face, but some things are easier said on paper. You've always been my quiet strength. You never asked for anything, but you gave more than anyone realized. I saw how they treated you, how they overlooked you, and it broke my heart. That's why I made the decisions I did. Not to punish them, but to protect you. To protect what matters. This family will fight you. They'll try to twist it. But don't lose yourself in the noise. You know who you are. And I know what you're capable of. Build something better. I love you, son. Always. Dad. I don't cry easily. But I did that night. I sat on the couch, letter trembling in my hands, tears finally spilling after months of holding everything in like a dam threatening to crack. It wasn't just grief, it was release. It was permission. I wasn't the spare. I wasn't the afterthought. I was the one he trusted to finish the job. Months passed. The court sided with me, unanimously. Adam's objection was dismissed with prejudice. Chloe withdrew her support from his motion and signed onto the community center project. She started coming by once a week to help with the planning. For the first time in years, we talked, really talked. She apologized for the way she'd ignored me growing up, for laughing at Adam's jokes when they were aimed at me, for letting Mom's favoritism define our roles. I forgave her. Eventually. Adam, on the other hand, moved out of his house after it was foreclosed. Marla filed for separation. Last I heard, he was living in a rental an hour outside the city and working sales at a car dealership. He still hasn't spoken to me. And maybe that's for the best. Mom sold the old house, not by force, but by choice. She moved into a smaller condo closer to the city. She visits now and then, mostly on Sundays, and she brings actual food instead of frozen casseroles. She still has moments where the mask slips back on, but they're fewer. She's learning to be a person instead of just a matriarch. As for me, I funded the construction of the Marcus Reed Community Center, named after my father, in the heart of the neighborhood where he grew up. We opened its doors last week. Free tutoring programs, financial literacy workshops, job training, a small clinic. The kind of place he would have walked into and stayed all day just to listen to people talk. I stood at the front on opening day, looking out at a crowd of over 100 people. Chloe stood beside me, smiling through tears. Mom sat in the front row, and I realized this wasn't revenge. It was restoration. For everything they tried to take, I gave something back. Not to them, but to the world Dad believed in. And in doing that, I found peace not in owning everything, but in building something that finally meant everything. That's what being head of the family really meant. And I was ready.